Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. In this podcast, I'll share stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So let's go back in time and hear some of the top news stories from this week in 1920. Automobiles must have 1920s license tags, declares the sheriff. If you were operating an automobile which shows a yellow streak, that is a 1919 license number plate, keep your eye peeled for Marshal Charles E. Green. Word has gone out from the sheriff's office that all automobiles operating under ancient licenses shall be stopped and their drivers arrested. Marshal Green has therefore served notice that beginning with Monday, he will take into custody all drivers of automobiles not equipped with 1920 license numbers. The marshal points out this ruling also applies to homemade plates of cardboard or other substances which carry the information that a license has been applied for. All cars bearing such plates will be stopped and their drivers given a grilling and perhaps placed under arrest. Such plates have been declared illegal by the state comptroller and orders have been issued that you shall be stopped at once. William Pelliser Jr. has been discharged. William Pelliser Jr., accused of the murder of Levy Ross, was arraigned before Justice of the Peace H.F. Moore at 1 o'clock Monday afternoon for a preliminary trial and acquitted, the court ruling that the killing of Ross was done in self-defense and was therefore justifiable. The trial was held in the Armory of Hastings Company of the Florida National Guard and was attended by a large crowd of local citizens. S.H. Goodwin, father-in-law of Ross, testified that Ross declared as soon as he had been brought to the Goodwin home after the shooting that he was going to die. He stated that Ross told him that after having gone out to the country with William Pelliser and his companions, he desired to return home with the party. William Pelliser, he said, accused him of stealing a gun and that a dispute arose over the matter. When Ross left the car, he told Mr. Goodwin that Pelliser shot him. The party then took the car toward Hastings, leaving Ross lying on the ground and calling for help. Other witnesses who were in the car with Pelliser claimed they were all planning to meet with Ross to get some moonshine near the old stockade outside of town. They had gotten out of the car, and that's when Ross pulled a gun and shot at them, and Pelliser jumped in the car, drew his own revolver from a pocket in the car, and fired back. They claimed they went to look for Ross after the shooting but didn't find him, and they thought he had run away. In stating his findings, Judge Moore declared he was unable to find in the evidence any details which did not support the decision that Pelliser had shot in self-defense. It was, evidently, he said, a case where the life of one man or the other must be forfeited. Skin game, theft, and assault with intent to kill alleged. A skin game resulting in more serious developments was the cause Thursday of 4 Elkton men becoming the temporary guests of Marshal Charles E. Green and Judge H.F. Moore, while one of them returned later for a more prolonged visit with our genial local officials. Reuben Fields, George Smith, Henry Smith, and Steve English were the 4 principals in the skin game, during the progress of which one of them is alleged to have lifted a watch belonging to Steve English. Insulted by such promiscuous use of his personal property, Steve proceeded to Hastings, where he swore out warrants for his 3 companions, charging them with gambling, and all were arrested by Marshal Green. On their arrival in Hastings, the trio, evidently desiring to become a quartet once more, returned Steve's courtesy by swearing out a warrant for him on the same charge they faced. All 4 pled guilty, and the court was enriched by $20. On their return to Elkton, an exchange of pointed opinions is said to have taken place at the depot. During the discussion, George Smith is accused of having emphasized an argument by placing a brick in close proximity to Steve's head. Steve is now undergoing medical treatment, while George is again in the clutches of Marshal Green, this time charged with assault with intent to kill. New train goes on between Jax and New Smyrna. So great has become the northbound traffic over the Florida East Coast Railway, the Flagler system, that commencing next Monday, March 8th, and continuing in operation as long as necessary, a special train will be operated daily from New Smyrna to Jacksonville as second train number 88. The train will be made up of 1 baggage car, 1 combination coach for white and colored, 2 first-class day coaches, and 1 parlor car. Second number 88 will leave New Smyrna daily at 8:50 a.m. Come through East Palatka at 11:20 a.m., Hastings at 11:35, Elkton at 11:48, St. Augustine 12:20, and it will arrive in Jacksonville at 1:30 p.m. Restrictions lifted. It's announced that all restrictions caused by the recent measures adopted to prevent an influenza epidemic will be raised today, and the flu scare of 1920 will go its way to join that of 1919 and become past history. All churches will be opened and services will be conducted as usual. On Monday, schools will reopen, and all restrictions pertaining to all public meetings will be removed. From news in Elkton, while crossing a part of the Dixie Highway which was being repaired, M.L. Grimes' wagon turned over, dragging him off the vehicle. His foot caught over the top of the wheel, twisting the ligaments in the lower part of his leg. The wagon was loaded with 16 sacks of potatoes, one of the sacks falling on Mr. Grimes, pinning him to the ground. He is confined to his bed after receiving medical attention. In Federal Point news, it's worthy of note that Federal Point provided the captain and a large percentage of the enlisted men of the new Hastings Company of the National Guard. Now on to this week's Talk of the Times, where I give you a glimpse of what people were thinking in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over 100 years ago. This week, people in town are rallying for better firefighting options after a blaze destroyed part of downtown. The article is titled, "Sentiment is Strong for Fire Protection," and it reads, "Since the disastrous fire that destroyed the auditorium and Stone Street and Miller Garage, a strong sentiment has been making itself felt in town to the effect the local fire protection should be strengthened to a very marked degree. The equipment of the fire department is far from good, and the department itself seems organized rather more loosely than is in the best interest of the town. The sentiment is by no means a reflection on the individual members of the department, but rather a criticism of the manner in which they have been forced by conditions to conduct their business. The chief criticism of the fire protection is aimed at the fire engine, which, while being an excellent machine in itself, is by no means suitable for the tasks it is obliged to perform. Such a machine, which must be towed to fires by an automobile or other means of locomotion, is a handicap too severe to be really efficient in a town like Hastings. All too frequently, no automobile is immediately available when the engine is needed, and valuable time is lost in hunting for one. Even when one is at hand, time is lost in hitching it to the engine. Fire prevention experts point out that it is the first 5 minutes of a fire which decides its course. Since December, Hastings has suffered 2 fires. It cannot be denied that the engine was extremely late in getting to each fire, and that it is quite possible that at any moment a fire may break out where the saving or loss of the building will depend entirely on how soon the engine can respond. There can be little doubt that when such a fire does break out, the fire will have gained too great headway for the engine to cope with it by the time it reaches the scene. 2 methods to remedy the trouble have been suggested, both of them good. One suggests the purchase of a tractor to be attached to the engine and to be kept in readiness at all times to drag the machine to a fire whenever needed. Several types of tractors are now on the market designed exclusively for fire department use. One, the Martin tractor, a 3-wheeled machine capable of considerable speed, has been found especially effective. A second suggestion contemplates the entire elimination of the present engine and the purchase of a motor fire engine or combination hose car and pumping engine. Several types of the latter are on the market. It is probable that part of the expense of obtaining a new engine could be met by trading in the present engine. It is quite possible also that an engine could be purchased from one of the large cities which might be discarding small engines in favor of larger ones. In that case, it is not unlikely the same method could be pursued by Hastings and the local engine disposed of to some other town. One argument in favor of increased fire protection is that, with better equipment, it would be possible for the local fire department to extend protection to the nearby farms located along any of the brick roads. At present, those farms have no protection. It is thought by those who have this feature in mind that an arrangement could be made whereby the farmers, who would gain the benefit of this broadened protection, would also share in the necessary expense. In any event, the matter of better fire protection is one which seems certain to claim considerable attention in the near future. That Hastings and its surrounding territory needs better protection, there can be no doubt. The means for providing it are yet to be discovered. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we'll listen back to a song that everyone was listening to 100 years ago. If you're like most people, you've had those moments of thinking back to lost loves of long ago, wondering what's happening in their lives these days, and perhaps if they were available for you to try to be with them again. Well, thanks to social media, sometimes the answer is just a quick search away these days, but that wasn't always the case. Back before the internet, often you were left to wonder where those lost loves were, what they were doing. And this week's song sums up that feeling. It's called I Wonder What's Become of Sally. It was first published in 1924 by Joe Schenck and went on to become very popular, being recorded by a number of artists. So, let's take a listen to a 1924 recording of I Wonder What's Become of Sally, performed by Al Jolson.
Old-time pal, an old-time gal, where are your smiles today? Friends of old, with hearts of gold, where have you drifted away? Where is Johnny and Nellie and all the rest? And where is the one I love best? I wonder what's become of Sally, that old girl of mine. The sun shines missing from our alley ever since the day Sally went away. No matter what she is, wherever she may be, if no one wants her now, please send her home to me. I'll always welcome back my Sally, that old girl of mine. I wonder what's become of Sally, that old girl of mine. The sun shines missing from our alley ever since the day Sally went away. No matter what she is, wherever she may be, if no one wants her now, please send her home to me. I'll always welcome back my Sally, that